Yeah, this topic of so many people suffering from depression and killing themselves is really important. I'm still thinking about it. I've heard, I told you that, right? That that there is a study about the universities in the US. Yeah. I think it's related to postmodern quicksand thinking, which does not help with getting grip on reality.
Right. There is a big mismatch between what's happening around the people and what's happening within them. And the values in this new age, there is not a what we call harmony. The values, people's values does not live in harmony with things around them. So there's a lot of internal conflicts.
Yes, that's right. It was interesting for me to hear that you're reading a German philosopher.
Oh, yes. I read Eckhart Tolle's book, The Power of Now, 5 years ago. That was a great book. Very, very, it helped me a lot at that time.
That book influenced Jim Carrey, the US comedian. You know him? The actor, Jim Carrey?
Oh, yes. Yes.
He changed his life completely after reading Tolle.
So Truman's World, that's him, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, welcome also to Ulrike, to Paul Thomas, to Alfred.
Alfred, you are always sitting in the dark here. Hello.
Great to make you made it spontaneously.
We could shine some light.
There we are. That's better.
Thank you.
Right. So thank you for the audience to participate in this breakout. And you feel free to put your questions to the panelists directly into the breakout, or you can also write your questions that you have or your comments into the chat. And Hans and Christine will capture the comments on the mural wall.
Perhaps I might say something to this mural whiteboard. As experiment number 2, we have made it, I think, last Sunday. I tried to, catch all the thoughts and connections between the thoughts on a whiteboard. And I invite you to even join that whiteboard. I've copied the link in the chat. Who doesn't see the link, maybe shout out loud and I will post it again. So you can, switch to the mural board, and there are some sections for even question as well. So we can try this, that you write your question there. And if I see, there is a question popping up, I will put it here in the discussion. And yes, even if you want to do your own mind map, talk map, I named it a talk map, word cloud, something like this, to structure your thoughts. Take some space, put your notes, and feel free to contribute as well. Simple as that, the mural works with the sticky notes, and you see on the left side there's a menu where you have the notes, and then you put it on the board, write on it, and hopefully don't destroy anything. No, that's easy. Yes. So we have the chat, we have speaking, and we have the mural board. Wow.
Wow, yes. And
complex.
Please, and everybody, please click on the 3 dots in the upper right of your personal, what's the word?
Frame.
Frame, yes. Yes, to change your name as you want to be addressed here. Some people like it to be called by their others by their surname. Some like to be addressed by their academic title. Yeah, so just change it the way you wish to be addressed here in this breakout session.
Yes, and welcome also, Morty, you made it. Great. And Dominik came in also. Yeah, feel welcome. And the panel, we all the panelists agreed that we, as a humankind, need to change our way of thinking. That's so easy. So how do we do that?
That's all you want to know.
Well, may I respond? And it's probably a repetition of what I said. If you rewind to the year 2020, which is, I would say, for humanity across the world, everybody was impacted by what happened. You know, in January of 2020, I was in Davos at the World Economic Forum. We had 150 Indian businessmen there. We had over 200 Chinese businessmen there. Top of the world politicians, leaders, academicians, political leaders, heads of state, 1,000 plus gathered in Davos in January 2020. Not one of them ever imagined that within the next few weeks, the entire world would come to a stop. And that would change our entire way of living and thinking and everything, which we have now accepted as a given. In fact, there is a very large company in Germany, one of the largest companies and the oldest companies of Germany, I will not name it, which in Munich built their new headquarters, which cost them €1 billion. This happened in 2019, I think, when they inaugurated it. In 2020, they officially announced that this company, 90% of the staff would work from home. And today they have accepted it. This German company has accepted it as a way of life. And they said brick and mortar is a waste. It is a waste to build buildings when you can operate from home with technology and everything that you have. So I think humanity is learning and has the tremendous ability to quickly adapt to the enormous changes that are coming about. Look at our children. Children don't go to schools. In Delhi, New Delhi, the capital city, schools are closed because of the pollution. And most people are encouraged to work from home. And across the world, even in Europe, there are certain countries which have now adapted to this new thing of children learning from home. So I think it is not difficult for human beings to change. But again, I want to go back to that story which I mentioned in Hyde Park, London, where Abdullah was searching for answers under the street lamp, whereas he had lost it somewhere else. This is what we are doing today. We are searching for answers where there is light shining and we can find easy solutions. Answers are not there. Answers are where it is dark. And if you want to get those answers, then you need to, look at the big picture, look inwards and find out what is all this goose chase about? Why are we running around in circles? What are we trying to, ultimately, what do we want in life? So that big question, nobody wants to answer because we are so caught up in this world where technology on the one hand is changing rapidly, economic purchasing power is increasing across the world. Across the world, the lower middle class is becoming middle class is becoming upper middle class. So people's lifestyles are also, and the first thing that you want when you start getting a lot of money is you want material comforts, which is natural. It's the human this thing. But where do we stop? How do we stop this? This is why I mentioned about the headless. We are running around like headless chicken, searching for answers, and we don't find it because we're not looking deep enough. We're not looking at the darker side of things where we can find those answers. And that is within ourselves. What are we doing all this for, ultimately? So this question, fortunately, has been answered by our Indian philosophers thousands of years ago, where they have said, look inwards. Ultimately, all your happiness is within yourself. You don't have to go around seeking those happiness. You have a Volkswagen car, and the neighbor has bought a Mercedes. Now your next car must be a Mercedes. So you chase a Mercedes car, thinking that will bring you happiness. So the Volkswagen for a while brought you happiness, then you throw it and you got a Mercedes. You have a Mercedes, your neighbor has bought a third car, you want a second car now, because that is you think is your happiness. So we are constantly chasing these material comforts and these material products, and the magic technology products that are coming about, launched by these multinational companies. And our life ambition has become that. So we're going in a totally different direction. And we're trying to seek answers like Abdullah under the street light. It doesn't work like that, no. So I think the big picture we have still not understood. And as for the human mind, we have tremendous capability. The human mind is millions of years old. Genetically, we have the ability to adapt, to change. And we have done that in the past, and we will do it again in the future if there is a calamity. And before a calamity arrives, we can still decide together. Our heads of state, in fact, I would advise heads of state to gather and discuss the future of humanity, the future of humankind. What is all this chasing about? Where are we heading ultimately? This topic, and I'm glad that Ms. Gita Payne has brought this up. It's a fantastic topic. This should be discussed by heads of state across the world, academicians, politicians, students, teachers, parents. We should all ask this question. I think it should be a larger mission now, and we should somehow spread this message that we need to start looking inwards and looking at our future. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. You're saying that humankind has the ability to adapt, and there is a question by Christian Trutz in the chat. Does that mean we need some sort of crisis, a new sort of crisis, so that we adapt even further?
That's an excellent question, outstanding question, and I applaud the person who has brought this question up, because this is precisely what I said. That instead of waiting for the next crisis or a series of crises which will arrive, which is going to catch us, unprepared, like it did in 2020. So the same thing can happen or will happen in the future. To avoid that, I think we should now spread the net far and wide. And this topic that Ms. Gita Payne and team have brought about should be discussed worldwide. I think there should be a worldwide network created by the organization, the sponsors of this topic, and universities across the world, heads of state across the world, academicians, politicians, leaders in business. Everybody should discuss this topic. It should be and then we come with prepared notes on how we're going to deal when such a crisis arrives, and so that we are not caught unprepared like we did in 2020. So I think we should not wait for a crisis. This is my advice. We should now make it a life mission. Young people across the world should get together, social media should be used for this. I mean, for God's sake, what are we doing with social media today? And all these companies are taking us for a ride, using our data and to make their profits. We should use social media for this instead of wasting our time on, unnecessary things. And there's so much of technology available today to discuss this topic, so that we are not caught unprepared. This is my advice. I mean, young people should discuss this. Universities should discuss this.
Yes,
and come up with answers.
In the panel on pandemics and meta-crises, Ilya Stembler, who's a longevity researcher, gave a lovely reference on what his and all longevity researchers' reference on crisis is: a state of helplessness. So crisis is not something we should look out for. Crisis is something that is happening and coming from complexity of life.
Yep.
Yes, and I totally agree with you, Mr. Morty. We have to discuss this further, and that is one of the ideas of Larnaca-Conferences, to make this an ongoing project, not only once a year, but to connect people to talk about this, in order to deliver new ideas how we can deal with this. Resilience is a relevant topic, and since Dr. Fatih is not here today, who is a crisis and resilience researcher, but he fell ill, he always addresses the topic of multi-resilience as an important factor. Multi-resilience means not only resilience in one system. For example, an economy, this focusing of economy is not how society works. Society differentiates itself in many subsystems, and meta-crises address all subsystems as one. So we have to talk about how arts, how media, how economy, science, and so on respond to crises in order to learn from each other. I think that is a really important point, to think about meta-crises and multi-resilience in one topic.
Excellent.
Thank you. Just to have a look at the chat. Christine, would you like to comment?
Yeah, so maybe first I will take the question of Julian, because he addressed Professor Ringera, who did not make it until now. So he handed it over to Mohan Murthy. Mr. Murthy, Julian wants to know, what is your opinion about the struggle of science and metaphysics in the future of humanity? Do you think we will find a way to connect them, or will they separate completely and understand a single path? Because it is one of the big problems that keep us destabilized in society. I don't want to get into a discussion of religion, but strictly science and metaphysics.
See, frankly, you cannot avoid science without religion, religion without science, because both are very highly interconnected. I think we are trying to separate the two, but if you look at the Eastern philosophers and read the Eastern philosophies, especially Indian, we have had our saints who wrote these religious texts. I wouldn't call it religious texts. These were texts to kind of formulate the form of life, or the way of living, the style of living. They connected the style of living with science. And India in those days had the most advanced knowledge in space science, in astronomy. We combined astronomy with astrology, and astrology grew up as a science. And mathematics, physics, distance between the earth and the celestial bodies was calculated precisely without any instruments by these learned rishis, as we call them, and they're all documented. It's not just humbug, So you can see Vedic mathematics as a science, and Vedic mathematics came into India not now, 7,000 years ago, and it is documented and it is studied by German universities. In fact, you have several universities in Germany which have Indology as a study subject, and in Indology they learn Sanskrit, which is the language where all these texts are written, and they're trying to decode many of these. In fact, Origin of the Universe was written already. These are not scientists who wrote it. These were religious saints who were connected with metaphysics, who wrote these books, and where knowledge was transmitted from the teacher to the taught over several thousands of years. And so all this is documented, and I don't have to say more, but everything is available today. And your Indology departments across Germany, because Germany is one of the finest examples where they have understood that India has secret knowledge, the relationship between metaphysics and religion, and how interconnected they are. They are not separate. You cannot separate them. They are interconnected, highly interconnected. You talk about, you have this God particle project in Switzerland. I don't know how many of you have been there. I have been there once, and I was quite impressed because I read about it and I wanted to go and see it. But they're trying to bombard an atom and create the Big Bang in a tunnel. Some of you may have seen that and read about this project. So this was already decoded by Indian saints, and it is written in the textbook called Bhagavatam Mahapurana, which is available in Amazon today. You can buy it and read it in English, and it has everything, precise information on how an atom is divisible and how it can create enormous energy and how the Big Bang occurred and how old is the universe. Everything is there.
It is the same with the Bible when you read the first word Bereshit in the beginning, and after that was the word, word as the beginning of the social community and the psyche reflecting on itself. There's another thing I was thinking about right now when you talked about religion and science, that from the perspective of system theory, both religion and science have the same function, to deal with the undetermined.
Yes. Yes.
So there were two questions by Ulrike Gregor, and I would like to invite Ulrike to raise her questions directly by words, so I don't have to read it. You are here.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't know how to. When Clara, you mentioned your executive coachings, and I wonder in how far the topics we started off with, also the well, let's call it inner work or whatever, but what do you experience in your executive coachings? Because that is the point where you make probably very influential people think about it. And afterward, I'd like, afterwards, my other question.
Okay, thank you. So let me share an example. There are several things I work with people when I coach them. But my main focus is really on their thinking process. So mainly I focus on facilitating their thinking and help them think more in a more efficient and more conscious way. So I once worked with this senior executive. She's very strong, she's very smart, and she has high integrity. She has good judgment. So she was trying to change her company for the better, but without success, because she's a very angry person. She's a very bad temper. If she does not see things as she wants, then she would, kind of let out her internal anger, and that shuts people away from her. So I worked with her I help her to see how her mind thinks, because I'm also trained in neurology. So I kind of let her realize that her tendency, her mind, and this kind of her unconsciously exclude people who are not like her. So her in a way, she actually create a exclusion culture within her team. People become silent, not because they don't know anything, but because their brains are under a lot of, the sense of being threatened. So she changed. She's more aware. She lives in a more conscious way, and she became more inclusive. So people around her became kind of, she feels that people are getting smarter. People are more collaborative. People are more creative. Not because people, not because people are really getting smarter, because she herself becomes more inclusive. She herself is leading more conscious. She's more aware of her own thinking. And she's more aware of what's happening in the people's thinking when people say something. She actually changed herself, like what I shared. She became a much happier person because she's able to deal with her own internal fear. And I think Mr. Murty said something very nicely. Behind every fear, behind every anger, there's a very deep sense of fear. So she's better. She's more able to manage her fear. And that actually miraculously changed her company. So being a happy person herself changed her company into a better place. Yeah. So that's one example.
Okay. That's a nice example. So that when you have punctually, you work on one person, but if this person has a lot of influence, then she will or he will influence the surrounding in a vast way. Yeah, Ulrike, you had another question?
Sorry, if I can add on that. I personally would think, I noticed that when we think about something like the future of mankind, there's a tendency that we think in a very big, perspective, and it's a global issue, and we need to take global actions, which is 100% correct. But there's also a tendency when we think in such a big and broad term, our minds tend to make it less dear to our own heart. It's like, other people's problem, and we tend to raise big ideas. What my experience is that if we take into our own heart, if we just start from ourselves and starting and make a choice of our own mindset, everyone here, and things will become different for us and around us. So I'm actually curious to hear, if we have time, of how you have started working on this area, like how you have started working on your own thinking. And I'm sure many of you have already started doing that. You have done something amazing. And if we have time, I would really like to know more about that. Sorry, Barbara, that's what I want to add.
Yeah, does anybody just respond? Because this is a question, direct questions to all of us.
Yes, Christine. Yes.
I think for me a very important thing is to think about my thinking, to view myself from above. It's a very important thing for me.
Yes. So how does that change you, Christian?
I became more aware of my life. I feel safer a little bit, and change a little bit my life. But I don't know. I don't know how it's changed, but I feel it changed something in my life.
Thank you for sharing. Thank you.
At the same time, we have another comment in the chat by Paul Thomas, who says, yes, yeah, we also need a groundbreaking global inclusive definition of wealth.
Yeah.
So, you had the term, Clara, you talked about happiness and the values behind that and the inner values. And I think that goes a little bit into the same direction. At the moment, we are all seen as consumers, and we are good people if we are good consumers in the mainstream. So it also needs a change in the global definition of wealth. And I think that again is something that's really huge and necessary really at the same time.
Absolutely. And like what Mr. Murty said, our brains are extremely adaptive. As long our brains are basically products of our environment. So if globally, educators, business people, business leaders, people who are influential can talk about using a new definition of wealth, we're not referring only to material wealth, but internal wealth as well. And that becomes a global language. Human brains are able to adapt to that very quickly. We just need to create that kind of momentum.
Thank you. This leads to a question that Ulrike already had posted in the chat for Mo and Murty, and it's the question is, in how far do you raise these topics in your company?
Well, excellent. I like this question that was asked about where do we start all this? Are we starting with ourselves? And who has started with himself? And there was one bold answer which came and which I like very much. I think all of us are capable of not only changing, but also creating awareness and a change in our circle of influence, which starts with our own families and then our own friends circle, our community, and then the society as a whole, and maybe through our companies. In my life, I think, and in my view, with humility, I must say that, and I'm very concerned about this, and I mentioned this in my keynote address when we had this a few weeks back. I think where we can start is, of course, ourselves, but also specifically in our ethos, in our values, in our ethics, in our morality. Because what I see and what we all see and acknowledge is that the global ethos, the global value systems, the global morality, and the global ethics is gone into the gutter now, unfortunately. If you look at the global average, it is down in the gutter. It was not so when the world was poor, or when the world didn't have so much of technology and comforts. As our comforts and technology have increased, so has our morality, ethics, and global value systems, everything gone down. Nations today are warring against each other, for resources, for natural resources. At what cost? Companies want to show profits to their shareholders, and they will do that at any cost. They will compromise on ethics, value systems, etc. Families are doing this today, unfortunately, where families don't give the right values, and our education system is down in the dumps. I don't know what they teach, but the education system across the world, the world average education content has been corrupted by all that is happening in terms of technology and all this race that we are running, chasing goods, chasing material comforts. So everywhere there is a corrupt kind of this thing. And the most corrupt is our global ethics, morality, value systems, which has gone down. We need to uplift this. And the only way we can do it is, of course, within our families. We should bring this into our education system as a must. In the old days, I remember when I studied school, we had something called moral science in India, in Indian schools. and when they taught you moral science, morality, and some of these values. Unfortunately, that is not being done so in any schools because of the kind of secular kind of a thing that we have today, and the politics behind it, etc. So I don't want to go into that. It's a sensitive topic in India also. But very unfortunately, the education system has not grown, has not been evolving to the needs of humankind. And only way to start is there in our homes, in our values, ethics, morality, and what we can teach our children, our future generations. So that's where we can start.
Thank you, Mr. Murthy.
What exactly do you do in your company? I was wondering. So is there anything you teach your employees, which come, I'm sure, I mean, there are from high-level management to workers, everything. And so the workers probably want to achieve more as well. And so we are back.
Well, we have zero tolerance as far as ethics, morality, and values of the company leadership is concerned. The leadership of the company is fully engaged in this, and so therefore that value system has been passed down to the corporate value systems of the company has been passed on over the last 40 years to every employee, and there is no compromise on for instance, let's talk about corruption. If there is any instance where something was compromised, where there was a problem of integrity, then it is immediately removed. So we are very strict about that, and so are many other companies. I mean, the multinational scenario today, most companies, German companies I know, and many European companies and Americans, they all have their own systems of integrity, morality, and corporate value systems as far as business goes. But even there, you see a lot of compromises. I mean, all these things are coming out in the media now. Facebook is there, and it's all there for us to see. And it's all the public media. I don't have to repeat that. We all know what's happening. Data privacy laws are misused and abused. Our data is shared and sold, to make money. So all that is happening. That is where, this is when I said global ethos and values. That is where our ethos has gone down. Where in business, because to make money, you do it, you kind of compromise on all your other value systems, and then you somehow nations are doing that, and for fighting resources, natural resources from it was oil and gas, the race. Today you have the green energy, so-called green energy, and the resources needed for the green energy. Lithium, for instance, the lithium mines, which are being bought over by countries, and where the workers are kept in very, very horrible working conditions, and those are the companies which give you the lithium for green batteries. So what is this green? How green is green? This is my question. Where are we heading? So who are we trying to fool? We are only fooling ourselves all the time. So ethics, morality, values, this is very important. I think we need to look at that.
Thank you very much, Mr. Murthy. You always show how big the picture is and how much to do. I want to step back a little bit on the topic of the wealth definition. So, because Gitta, since you concentrate on concept clarity, what would be your approach on referencing wealth?
Thank you, Christine. Relating to what you just said, Mr. Murthy, on morality, as I said earlier, to me, the greatest freedom and the highest value is the ability to criticize myself. I think there's no bigger freedom than that. When we think it through, and this is part of thinking about ethics, of morality. When we think it through, a person that has nothing to eat has other things in mind than to criticize him or herself. A person that whose life is in danger has other things than to criticize him or herself. So ethics, morality, stuff like that are some sort of luxury. We need the freedom to live an ethical life. And when I think about wealth, I think about health. I think both we can reference both the same way as being able of leading a creative life. Because creativity, on the other hand, depends on the ability to criticize myself. So health and wealth are deeply related to each other. When I'm so sick that I cannot move any longer, cannot think any longer, cannot live, as Clara noted earlier, a happy life, then I can be rich as hell. It helps nothing, next to nothing. So I think wealth and health in the end are the same thing.
Thank you, Gita. So there's another question in the chat from Christian. He asks, why are we all so addicted to material things? Is that some kind of insecurity in us? Whoever wants to explain. Maybe we start with Clara.
Well, that's a great question. I have some thought about that, but I'm not sure. I think I would love to hear other people's thought as well. I think by nature, our brains are structured in a way that we have a very we have big sensitivity to dangers, to threats, much bigger sensitivity to danger and threats than to happiness. So that's why it's so difficult for people to feel happy. We so much rely on materials to make us feel happy. So it's kind of a human nature to protect ourselves by owning more, by possessing more, in order to feel safe. Like what you said, a deep sense of insecurity. Having more, getting more, possessing more make us feel safe. But that is the downside of our human brain, even though it is a product of, many years of evolution. We have to learn to manage that kind of need, especially when that need pushes to a wrong direction. That's part of what I mean by our thinking. If we let our thinking take over the better side of us, the need to get more, to possess more in order to feel safe will lead us to a very dangerous position.
May I, Clara? Just one idea here. Many abstract concepts like security, freedom, and so on work paradoxically. We cannot think security without feeling insecure. So I think a big part of feeling more secure and needing less materialistic things is to learn to deal with the undetermined, to learn to deal with ambivalence, polyvalence, stuff like that. Because that in globalization, complexity has reached another level, and it has become emergent. It has another quality, and with this another quality of complexity, people have to deal. And if they have not learned to deal with this emergence, they will still buy stuff, especially when they are supported by toxic social architectures like the social media, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, where people are exploited for their emotional movements. That adds to the problem. And they are exploited for their emotional movements because marketing campaigns need emotional people to buy cheap stuff. Yeah, so it is a vicious circle here that when I feel insecure, I buy more stuff, and then I'm on the social media and they get more emotional, and then I buy more stuff. I think we have to address this topic from a global perspective and not only from the perspective of the individual, because we have to work on the social architectures here to make a change that really lasts. You work with singular people, with individuals, which I find highly important to do that. Yeah, but when you start there and look at the growing population of billions of people, yeah, then the psychological approach needs something else. Yeah, that we address the problems of the social architectures of our societies. If we do not do that, people's insecurity will lead to the question, how can I feel more secure? And the moment they do that, they are in the midst of this paradoxical problem.
Thank you very much, Gita, for bringing in this perspective. It's very important. I want to throw in an own thought, because I'm also dealing with consciousness and these topics, and also dealing with Gita's FORMWELT. I have the point that I don't think that we should attract happiness in our life, because it, as Gita says, it works paradoxically. With happiness, there automatically comes suffering. So why don't we attract balance instead of happiness? I would prefer this thought.
Oh, now you're provoking everybody.
I don't care. That's why I'm here as well.
But that's actually good. I like that, because irritation is good.
Yeah,
I need
Dominik,
to think about that one.
I think it depends on the reference of happiness. If you understand happiness, for example, as the ability to become creative,
yeah,
then it's a dry reference on happiness. But if you address happiness as the idea of everybody is feeling inside joyful all the time, then you are reaching for a goal that will never, be realistic. So it depends. Right.
That's what I'm observing on social media about this positive psychology and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So Dominik, you already wrote. Yeah.
I'm just thinking loud now, because when I get you in terms of balance, I'm thinking, and that is my reference to it. I'm thinking of, okay, you should not be overburdened with one side, but not even with the other side. But both of them are important, So that is my thing of balance, because you need challenges. You need something, irritation, call it whatever you want, to go ahead. Because if you're just happy, then there's also a monotony, because then anything that can happen around you will just really smash you down. So when I think of balancing, it's both parts are possible, but it's not just, going straight all the time the line. So it's both of these elements you need. So that is what I'm thinking when you talk about balancing.
Yeah, great.
But maybe, Christian, can I ask you, when you say you actually discard the concept of being the attraction of happiness, in your view, what would be your ideal or your vision of people's inner world? What is the state that you would think be ideal for people?
Thank you very much for this question. So it's I hope I can express it well enough in English. I think that it's more about inner calmness, a balance. Yes, it is a kind of balance that I feel its presence. I only can bring new things in the world when I'm totally in present, not in emotion, which overtake me. That is what I'm looking for.
Yeah, I think I understand. It's like being present, but at the same time, you have a inner peace, stability. Okay, thank you.
I'd like to come back to the chat, because there is by Paul Thomas. He said, Well, you cited the big picture, and Paul Thomas says we have to implement those global concepts in the curricula of schools and universities immediately, in spite of to fight growing nationalist approaches. And Gita was talking about, so we have to sort of address the social architecture, because I mean, I know many people who are in these institutions and they are fighting for a better life and they want to do some good, and it's so hard for them to get across because these institutions are very old-fashioned and they're very strict and stable and like it's like a social system that's really fighting for its old course. So for the people who really want to make a change, it's really hard when you hear them talk about it. It's a real quest and a real journey.
What institutions are you referring to?
I mean, if you just, I have people who work in schools, for example, or
Yes.
people who work in universities, just to take these two institutions as an example. And when you talk to the people, they are unhappy and they want to have changes, and they say we need changes, and they are fighting for us, and it's so hard for them to get across.
I understand. I have some short ideas, and then I would like to hear what Mr. Murthy is thinking, because I think, Mr. Murthy, you have written down a lot of ideas like Clara and everybody else was talking. But just these two things concerning education. Barbara, you cannot change school and education systems by politics, not in democracy without the help of outsiders. This will not work. We have to hack the system. When you look at politics, it is politics is an institution that, the way we know it today, started in old Greece, with a population of round about 24,000, 25,000 in the cities, 240, 260,000 in the whole nation. This is a completely different kind of animal we are dealing with today. Politics is always too slow to keep up with the changes that is happening on a more global level. So politics is a little bit some sort of resonance system. That is one point. The other is politics is deeply implemented in the whole communication system. It is dependent on the citizens of the countries. Yeah. So if you want to change the education system, you first have to raise a higher awareness of the necessity to change the system. But when you do this inside of the rigid structures of today's, for example, Germany's education system, you will see that opportunistic structures are always taking over. That is why I come from a completely different position, and I say we have to hack the system from outside. We have to deliver tools, ideas, and so on to help society to create, as a communicative process, new education systems. Yes, but when we address this on politics alone, we will get next to no results.
Thank you. I think it's important that you say that, and you kept saying this in the other panels and discussion rounds as well. And when I then hear hack the system, okay, I just let it settle. I would like to elaborate on that a little more deeply, but pass on to Mr. Murthy.
Yeah, I think any attempt to drastically change, for instance, the education, will not hold water anywhere. I mean, nowhere can you start suddenly changing, the education system. I think any change has to be slow, in small doses. It's like, your vaccination for COVID, first dose, second dose. Now they've come out with this booster shot. So I think in small doses, it has to be done. It has to be done quietly and in consonance with politicians and in consonance with society. Ultimately, society in democracies, we all agree that societies should demand for change, should first of all perceive that there is a problem, and should demand a change. And through this demand will come consensus of small changes here and there. And so it will take time, but in small doses, if you can bring about, these changes in the curriculum, in our education in schools and in universities, and concurrently changed the patterns of the society in terms of this chasing materialistic comforts for happiness. And I want to go a little deeper into this question of happiness. I think happiness is skin deep. If you look at it, happiness is not deep enough. But there's something more deeper than happiness, which is within us. You don't have to search it anywhere outside. I don't want to sound too philosophical and bore all of you, but then
please
it is already
bore us.
It is already within us, this happiness. It is not happiness. It is more deeper than happiness, and it's called bliss. BLISS. I don't know how many of you have heard of this word bliss. Bliss is eternal happiness. And this eternal happiness is already within us. You don't have to search for it outside. That's why all this happiness is temporary. Mercedes car, one Mercedes, happiness. One nice house, happiness. Then the house with a swimming pool, more happiness. But then the happiness ends in a few months. And you're looking for something else to make you happy. So we are chasing this constantly. But if you stand and question yourself, what is all this chasing that's going on? Why are we doing this? We're doing it because of pressure from our peers and our neighbors and from societies that are changing and going in that direction. I'm not saying it is wrong or right. I don't want to judge. I don't want to be a judge of what's happening. But I want to say that if you're looking for happiness, then it's temporary. It is not, it will never last. It is not everlasting. The real happiness is called bliss, and that happiness is already within you. And you can find that happiness anywhere you want. You don't have to go anywhere. You can find it in the confines of your own house, within yourself. And if we can teach this in our schools, when children are in their formative age, and meditation and happiness, parents and teachers should know about this, and this should be communicated in small doses, not in heavy doses. Heavy doses, you'll have resistance in societies, but small doses of this, where societies begin to change slowly. It'll take time, maybe a few 100 years, I don't know, or maybe even sooner than that, because it happened in 2020. We changed. Suddenly, you took a U-turn in everything that you did. So it is possible, but in small doses, and start with this thing of changing the curriculum in a very small way, and then that will lead to a change. You cannot have rapid, drastic changes.
I think when it comes to bliss, when I look into history, I look at, and this is just a small critical point here. I look at the monks in Tibet, and the little boys there learned to meditate very early in life, and they had bloody fights among the monasteries. So I do not think that bliss is the only thing we should explore. It is important, but the other thing is to work on a clear mind, to learn how rational thinking is working, to learn to think logically, to explore all the wisdom of science of the last century and do not throw it away as many people do today. Yeah, I love to be blissful. And I listen to many people interested in spirituality and esoteric, and I often hear them saying the old thinking is wrong, and now we are going the holistic way, and we are searching for our spirituality and awareness and so on. And then they fight over and over and over again. Why? Because they go an ideological path. Yeah. So I think to find bliss in I learned that to find bliss in my life is also something about utmost clarity. And I find this in many Indian or old Indian texts. When I listen to the old Indian philosophers, clarity of mind was always a highly important topic to them.
Exactly. Yeah. If I may, it sounds interesting because we said east, and I would like to cite Eckhart Tolle's book, The Power of Now. So that's East meet West. So he teaches them a method of be aware of your mindset. Is your mindset? Are you thinking about past or future, or are you thinking about now? Once you are present, once you actually are not haunted by the past and by the future, when you're fully present with now, your mind becomes clearer. Your fear, once you're aware of that, your fear actually becomes less, and you're in a much better state to think for the best solution, a most appropriate solution for what is happening right now. So I actually believe, and I find a lot of benefits in Tolle's teaching to find that moment. I think that's what maybe Christine called as the inner peace, the presence, being fully present. Yeah, just want to make that point. It's so interesting.
Yeah.
Thank you. So I would like to invite Julian to come into the discussion, because he talked about some interesting things in the chat. Maybe you will bring it in by yourself, Julian. Not here at the moment, so I won't address his questions now when he's not listening.
Can I share something that I'm doing?
Of course.
Because we were talking about education, educators, how we teach people doing this. I actually created and also participated quite a few online groups. It's in China. So where we discuss and exchange ideas of how to create a better inner worlds by ourselves. So we talk about meditation, we talk about mindfulness, and that kind of effort is spreading. It's like a ripple. It's like it's spreading. So on one hand, we need to raise this global awareness that this is an important thing, that we need to have investment in it. We need to have people, pay more attention to this. And I also believe that as individuals, regular people like us, we can do something. If we just talk about it with people around us, we create groups, we spread ideas, and we can make it happen.
Yeah, and this leads me handle it over to Gita, because she told me that FORMWELT online, the platform she wants to build, will be an enlightenment tool. May you tell us something about this, Gita? How it functions for the awareness?
I think I already did. It's about clarity of mind. When you the other way around. Most people do not know what they mean. They cannot say what they mean, so they cannot mean what they say. And that is a continuing problem in conflicts we already had over and over and over and over again. This leads also to the question earlier, the question of security, Clara. When you think about your own insecurities, they often have a lot to do with that you do not know what you have in mind when you think about freedom or other abstract things. And I often see that people, especially in the social media, fight with each other, not about what they really were thinking, but because what has happened between them due to that they cannot say what they mean. And the really insane thing here is that when we think about it, almost nobody can really say what he or she means. But many people believe that when someone else is saying something, he or she means what he or she is saying. That is absurd. Yeah. To me, enlightenment is not only about clearing my emotions. It is first about clearing my own thoughts. I come from a family with many trauma due to at least two grandfathers who were Nazis. Yeah, Third Reich Nazis. And I experienced there that almost nobody talked about the elephant in the room. We had taboos over the place. That did not help with becoming clearer in your own mind. To me, it was a question of survival. Staying in this problem and in this family and probably going down with insanity, alcoholism, or whatever, or choosing a completely other path and creating myself new from the very beginning, from the start, from scratch. And I did that via language. I think that we can all work on ourselves, but as long as we do not work on clarity of our concepts, we will have the problem that we cannot decide whether our emotional path is the ethical one or not. So to me, enlightenment is, as you said it, a perfect combination of traditions and philosophy of the East and the West.
Thank you. Very integrative approach. May I just put a question? Because when I heard Mr. Moti talk about, we have to do it step by step and slowly, and I hear Gita talking about we have to hack the system, then to me it seems like two different concepts, but maybe I'm wrong.
Totally wrong. You cannot do this with everybody. You have to start with few people. And they have to work with each other, and they have to live and give a good example. And by doing that, others will follow and so on. As I think it was Christine in the very beginning, she quoted Margaret Mead. It is a few people who will change. Yeah, and then others will follow in a good way, and it is done from a systemic perspective and not with this, I go there and you have to change. That cannot work. That's my perspective, and now I want to know what Mr. Moti is saying to this.
Yeah, I fully agree. I mean, we cannot have abrupt and sudden changes coming about. It can, of course, when you are helpless, like in 2020, what happened, then we had to change in small things in our lifestyle and whatever. But deep, sudden changes cannot be imposed from outside. Without, it has to be in small doses. Yes. And I believe in that. It has to be done in a very small. But I want to come back to this question of happiness versus bliss, and Miss Gita Payen mentioned about the Buddhist monks who do meditation during the day and fight, during other times in their leisure. So I don't want to go into why they're doing that, but I just want to say this, that all that meditation is of no use. A meditation that teaches you to meditate and then go and be violent against somebody or against each other is not meditation. Meditation is to change your entire way of thinking. And in a state of meditation, you're not even aware of yourself. The awareness of yourself is gone, because you are now one with the universal spirit. So, and everything around you belongs to you, and you belong to that. So,
you cannot institutionalize this. Yeah, it's not working.
You will not be able, I'm not saying institutionalized meditation.
I
but
mean,
I'm-
I mean,
what I-
as a something you put the children in, and then they have to, yeah, and believe that that will change. It will not. It is like you are saying. It has to be something integrated in your life.
It has to be integrated, yes, but it is a way of thinking. Ultimately, it's to become conscious of yourself, because ultimately, one of the colleagues in the panelists mentioned about consciousness. I like that, and you're doing training on consciousness. If we can bring about this awareness early in life of being aware of yourself, looking at the mirror, and allowing children to grow up looking at the mirror and being conscious of themselves, their own breathing, their own thinking, way of thinking, patterns of thinking. I'm not meditation and yoga and all that is not this just the physical part of it. It is a pattern of thinking that matters. And ultimately, if you can change that in a slow manner, the pattern of thinking of human beings, which has unfortunately been corrupted by the material world, only then you can see change. Otherwise, you will not see any change. We'll be still searching for that lost ring under the street light. So, if you want to bring about change, the individual has to change. How do you change the individual? Changing the pattern of thinking of that individual. And how do you do that? By deep diving into yourself. We call it meditation. You may call it something else. I'm saying deep dive. Why don't you deep dive into yourself? Is that going to be difficult? Is that an embarrassment to society? That some societies say, okay, no, we will not deep dive because that belongs to Easterners. We are all ultimately human beings, and we have to learn to deep dive into ourselves. And there's nothing wrong in that. And even if you institutionalize that, you don't have to institutionalize it, but it will become institutional once people learn and enjoy doing it. I'm not saying give up everything in life and start deep diving into yourself and stay at home and be in that state of bliss. But what I'm saying is, if you want to change the pattern of thinking of human race, you have to start early. And how do you start early? If you're teaching waste disposal to school children, why can't you teach children to deep dive and help them to look at themselves in the mirror and understand their own being of existence and consciousness? So, and breathing, breathing exercises, for instance, which help in clear thinking. So, call it by any name, and it belongs to humanity. It doesn't belong to India. It belongs to all of us. Some have chosen that path, some others have not. Some others refuse to. But there is nothing going to be imposed. But we have to understand that, you may have one answer, one right answer to a problem and 1,000 wrong answers. And the problem with humanity is that we are searching for answers in the 1,000 answers, which are all wrong. And as Goethe, the famous German philosopher said, he said, man will do, or human beings will do the most rational thing, but only after exploring all the wrong options. This is what humanity is doing today. We are busy exploring all the wrong options, where we have answers, the right answers, but we refuse to look at them. We don't want to. We are embarrassed to look at them. We say it doesn't belong to us. No, we will not look at them. But there are answers already, because human race is not as old as 2,000 years. Human race is 1,000,000 years old.
No, everybody is reflecting.
Anybody wants to add something to this? Or
yeah, I was reflecting on Mr. Multi's words, and I was thinking, what if the inner observer is on and we construct our thinking by keeping our inner observer alert? What would you say to that, Mr. Multi?
I lost you in between. Can you repeat that question? My apologies.
Jung, can't hear you.
Thank you. Thank you. We have an inner observer, and this inner observer is trained, for example, with awareness practices we know from India and elsewhere in the world.
Yeah.
And what if the inner observer is part of our thinking, part of our constructing thoughts and speech? What do you think about that?
I think it's an excellent thing. If that can happen, that is bliss. Because, see, ultimately, you say inner observer, I call it the conscience within us, which says don't do it, but still you want to do it. Something tells you do it, do the wrong thing. But the inner observer says and consciously warns you and says don't do it. But still you compromise. You don't believe in the inner observer. What I'm saying is that when you deep dive into yourself, when humanity decides to deep dive and search within themselves, then that networks with the inner observer and says that all that you see around you is all one. Ultimately, we are all one. And then everything, all your other smaller, differences, your jealousy and your arrogance and your status and that you are big and your pride and everything goes away, is wiped out, and you become part of that one single universal spirit. So I think it's very important for the self to connect with the inner observer, and this deep dive will help in that. And this we can teach at an early age, in a formative age, to our future generations, the children of our world, our planet. Then you see a different planet altogether. Many of the things will be 99% of the things that we are doing is all rubbish. I don't know where we are getting all this, but ultimately it doesn't bring you that bliss.
Thank you. During the last, sorry,
I have a comment.
Sure. Yes, please.
So in the first place, I do appreciate all the discussions and thoughts which have been taken place so far. But somehow I want to get back to the original question, which is the future of mankind. I understand that all that stuff is correlated somehow, but what I would be more interested in is the following. Do we have a clear vision of where we see humanity in the future, in the first place? The second thing, and that's something I'm struggling with for quite some time, is we know where we are today, and we know how we got there. So all this knowledge is there. It's evident. It has been explored. So the question I have, apparently there is a chasm between what we know and between what we do. Because you could easily say we know where we are today. We have a very clear understanding, for example, of the Earth system and how we influence the Earth system in not a very positive manner. So the point is simply, what levers do we have to pull to put us back on the right track if we have a clear understanding of where we see humanity in 20 years, 50 years, or whatever, or maybe we don't see a future for humanity because something which we cannot envisage will happen. So, what I'm looking for is, on the one hand, the knowledge which we have created over centuries or more than centuries, and how we can use this knowledge to implement actions which actually will get us back on track. And I mean, there is, of course, enlightenment was mentioned. There were tons of books are written about mind shifts and so on and so forth. And still, I can't see things really happening at this point in time. For me, it's like there's a group of people with knowledge, be it scientists, whatever. There's another group of people which are decision makers, and they are the inhabitants of our world, which are living in social environments. I personally call the way we live in Western countries typically a comfort zone. And people don't want to change this comfort zone because it's a great life we have. I mean, all we are sitting here are living in a comfort zone and have a great life. But my feeling is to get into a future state, we have to give up pieces of our comfort zone. We cannot live a sustainable life with 10 billion people on this planet, while at the same time we reduce nature to essentially wasteland. So, there are so many oxymorons in what's going on today. And so the question is how we do address it. How do we educate the decision makers? They are possibly living in a bubble which is far from reality. How do we get back to recognize that we are part of nature? And how do we get economists to understand that the economies are a subsystem of system Earth? So these are some fundamental questions, at least for me. And how can we address all that stuff that we are not running? Or I would even say we are already sitting between a rock and a hard place. So how do we get out of this trap?
I would like to start with some easy points, and then we can go further to a philosophical perspective from Mr. Murti and Clara, if you like. That's okay with you, Mr. Murti and Clara?
Yeah.
Yes, of course.
Okay, thank you. I think, from another perspective, when we look at the history of mankind, the questions you are raising here, Mr. Steinhardt, mankind has asked over and over and over again. It's a constant struggle. It's not something we do now. And I think the idea to change the world via a vision is very dangerous, to say the least. I think we should first understand what we have tried in the past and did not work. That would be a first step. And then we have to think systemically. What are the things that really are making a difference in people's lives? We can talk about changing ourselves, but it is a very luxurious perspective for someone who has nothing to eat. Yeah, so first we have to ask this question, what is really helping people to emancipate themselves in their own lives? And one of the systemic things that really can help is unconditional basic income for everybody. Yeah, just to give a little bit more practical perspective here on not that the other ideas won't be practical. I just mean, when we think about the problems we have on a global scale, we have to first think about what is, for example, laid down in the Maslow pyramid. What are the problems people have and have to be first solved before we can climb to the next level of problem solving? For now, and today, we still have time to address the big topics as unconditional basic income, as not, as Mr. Murti said, exploiting the workers in the lithium factories, stuff like that. Look at the global slaughterhouses, how people are exploited there, and what we are doing with the animals. or with animal life. These are topics we can address, and we can do this politically and economically by creating other chances for people and by helping people to lead a better life. And when we do that, thinking from first a social and a very fundamental and ecological perspective, I think we can rise from there. But I think to believe that we will have a better world in the future is the first step into an ideological approach. We can have another world and another future and another future again and again and again. As Mr. Modi said, step by step. It is the same with change. Starting with the things we actually can do. That would be my idea here so far.
But Gitta, this what you just explained is a vision, isn't it? A vision of having a world where basic income is installed globally, where slaughterhouses are functioning with humanity values and stuff like it's the same. We have to decide on something, don't we? And that's ideology.
Ideology from my perspective is has the function of Gleichschalten. It's a word to bring everybody in line. That is not what I'm intending here. I'm talking about projects. When I say vision, I mean coupled with soft values. Yeah, when I talk about empathy, love, and stuff like that, I'm already deep in trouble. I'm talking about projects. That is something we can do. The German, for example, government can decide on working on a step-by-step project to implement unconditional basic income. Other countries can follow, just as one part. It's I would not call it a vision. Do you see the difference? It's a reference question.
I'm not sure.
Okay, I can live with that.
And of course, you have to say what on which outcome this project or which outcome do we try to foster with the project. So we have some higher values or something, some direction.
Yes.
And this direction we think is better for the world. Otherwise, we wouldn't do it.
Yes, of course.
So have ideology.
Again, the function of ideology, I will call it worldview. Yeah, I differentiate between ideology and worldview. So, and the function of ideology is to bring people in line. That is not what I'm proposing here. I propose projects to help people to unleash their creativity for society, like the UBE.
Yeah, but we have to bring people in line to do the project. Otherwise, everyone does things.
Okay, let us not fight about semantics here. I just differentiate these two concepts in order to make clear, what the dangers are here. Okay? Yeah, and I do not think that it is bringing people in line when we create a democratic decision to implement the UBI. Yeah, UBI.
Okay, thank you. I have Alfred Steinert, you came in with the idea. Anything you want to add to your question?
Well, I mean, you can maybe wish to call me Alfred. That's less fun. No, I mean, I understand what Gitta was saying, and the approach is also clear. But the question is, how do you scale that? And what is the impact of geopolitics and the whole thing to scale this up possibly?
Yeah, I would do it step by step. We have a proposal. It is already published at Karlauer Magazine, where we start with those who are already working voluntarily in society. Why do not pay them? Yeah. Start with that. What is with the mothers who are staying at home and helping their children to get a good education in home office and so on? Yeah, that is something we can do. It costs next to nothing. On the contrary, the German Hartz IV system is very expensive. Yeah, its bureaucracy is very expensive. We can do that step by step, and not in one big sweep. Yeah, just step by step by step, and see where we get there from there.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. I have a question in the chat from Julian Bondary to Mohan Murthy. Mr. Mohan Murthy, you remind me of Sadhguru, which I'm a big fan of, and I think you gained one here. I'm quite familiar with the history of India and its culture, its gods, etc. There are some similarities between those writings or stories and current science. But wouldn't it be beneficial and efficient for everyone to tell them by name, not to use them as stories and not to turn them into real characters, instead learn what is needed from them? Again, I will return to an objective perspective, and I would like an answer as well, maybe with a little spice on top, because we have to adapt to the future, a systematic and useful thinking.
Well, thank you. That's a difficult one. If you go back to some of the basic Indian texts and the Indian philosophy, then there is a definite connect between your environment, between yourself and those around you, and between those around yourself, those around you, and with everything you see around you in nature, animate as well as inanimate. In fact, in our belief, and it is evident today with scientific experimentation, rocks and stones have life. Everything around you, even inanimate objects, have life of their own. And because they are made up of atoms, ultimately, we break it down. What are they made of? They are made of atoms. So ultimately, everything boils down to the fact that all of us are interconnected. I applaud Mr. Steinhardt for bringing up, very frankly, bringing up, this question, the basic question of how we're going to address this problem. And truly admirable the way he put it. And I have deep respects and I applaud what you said, Mr. Steinhardt. I think the only way we can do this, and as Ms. Gita Payne has already mentioned, it has to be in small doses. But my one suggestion, which I have, and I've mentioned that in the passing, but I want to mention it again, and perhaps wish the organizers of this event consider that they make it happen. Something like the World Economic Forum in Davos, which talks about the world economy, mostly the industry and the leadership in the world economy, etc. Can we create a kind of a mission? Because there's nowhere in the world I see, in all the conferences that we have, the discussions we have, nobody's ever brought this up, this beautiful topic of the future of humankind, and had detailed and an ongoing discussion. It cannot be a one-off discussion. It has to be an ongoing discussion. Only way you can do it, and where you get all the participants like the World Economic Forum has got. And it was built not overnight, but it was built over a period of 50 years of struggle and hard work. And they have created this beautiful system of dialogue and discussion and consensus. Let me add here, I've been going to Davos for the last 30 years. And 30 years ago, there's this problem of corruption, for example, corporate corruption. And India had plenty of it. And many other countries, including Germany, has it, I know. So corruption was a topic which was never discussed. But we brought it in. The participants said, we have a problem. We must discuss this as a problem. And we have to find answers. And then the forum started a series of sessions on corporate, corruption, how nations get corrupt. Then you had Transparency International in Berlin, which was founded and which came up with this thing of assessing nations based on their corrupt systems and ranking them. And there was a coordination between what was happening in reality and between what is needed to change. And how today there is a corporate kind of a mission across the world over the last 2 decades or so, that thing of zero tolerance to corruption. I'm just giving one example of how that one issue, and the World Economic Forum has solved several such issues, big issues. And that one issue was solved, through dialogue, discussion, and consensus between world leaders, business organizations, business leaders, etc. So it is possible, but then you have to institutionalize the mechanism of how you're going to do it. And it cannot be, a one-off effort. It has to be an ongoing, continuous process where you engage world leaders, business leaders, politicians, and academicians, and students, and everybody in that mission, and address problems which come up and find solutions, consensus in solutions, which ultimately will be implemented in each of those countries. So it is a long-term thing, but you can create this institution. I think this should bring about some kind of a huge this thing in terms of institutionalizing this dialogue and making it universal, not just restricted to, the small group. Good that we have this group, very lively and good discussions. A lot of good points came up, but I think we need to institutionalize this. And I love what Mr. Steinhardt said. And this should lead to something, and the only way you can do it is to set up an institutional mechanism.
Yeah, thank you.
So maybe Clara also wants to add something to this or bring in her own perspective on this topic.
Well, I think the discussions are beautiful. I already said that I believe in we start from ourselves is a good starting point, and at the same time working for a global platform that we can all work together. Just one idea I would like to raise is about inclusion. Our mind naturally actually work against inclusion. We naturally separate people. We naturally agree with people who are like us. We disagree with people who do not like us. So that's kind of human nature. And that's why we deal with issues and problems with a lot of anger, with a lot of criticism. And that has been all the tradition, a lot of conflicts coming together. And we believe that is a way that should be the right way to, using conflicts to resolve conflicts. Well, what I would like to raise is actually the concept of inclusion. By inclusion, I mean to really embrace and respect differences and turn that differences into something, like 1 + 1 is bigger than 2. And I think this is so difficult. It is really a work against our human natures, work against our brain structure. And it is especially important that we need to train ourselves and train our children to have a more inclusive mindset when we look at differences. Personally, I believe when we want to change something, if we use anger to deal with things that we don't like, we disagree, usually we'll end up with another problem. We'll end up with a new issue, and we find new anger or new new conflicts to deal with this new conflict, and that will never end. And that is probably why, throughout history, though some of us are aware of the issue, but we are never able to resolve it. So this is probably from an Eastern perspective that we need to understand there is a big, it's called from Lao Tzu, from Tao Te Ching, that the way which is named is not the right way. And we need to really dig deeper to find the right way. And I think so far we haven't found it. We really need to look hard and see what we have tried, the 1,000 ways we have tried. If they are not working, we need to find a new way. And the new way for me is we should, it's a little bit like nonviolence campaign. We should not use anger to deal with anger.
Right.
Yeah, Barbara, please.
There's a direct question for Clara Wong from Jürgen. He would like to know how you set up projects in China which are considered conducive for the future of humankind. For example, epistemology, decision-making processes, realizations, epistemology. Could you say something to that?
Okay. So I'm just a regular people who just feel concerned with the future of mankind. So I just do my small part. Throughout my career, my previous life and my current life, I have a lot of connections with people. So I set up groups, WeChat groups, because we use WeChat in China a lot. So I have a few groups where I have gathered, people coming together to the groups. But I have about 200 people in a few groups where we share ideas, and I invite people who have like, you remember I asked Christian, and he's kind enough to share his own thoughts, like this kind of think of his own thought. So I invite people like that, and I invite them to share their own stories and how they train themselves to think their thinking. And we also share ideas about meditation, doing mindfulness, and parents share ideas of how they teach their children to be more aware of their emotions, to deal with their own inner fears. So it's more like, sharing groups, and a lot of positive feedback from the participants. And I can see how they spread ideas, and our sharing groups is becoming larger and larger. So that's what I mean by starting from ourselves, by not creating negative energy, but by being a positive energy for all people. So that will attract people to come, because people are looking for security. People look for positivity. If we are able to create that kind of energy, and if we ourselves are that kind of energy, and we can make changes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. We've almost been together now for 2 hours, and so we are getting closer to our closing time. Gitta, would you like to wrap up?
Yes, I just want to like to add a little bit of Western wisdom to this idea of becoming aware and dealing with conflict and so on. And I would like to tell you what I do in our workshops and seminars. It's the same idea as you have, Clara, and you, Mr. Moti, but I do it the Western way, because I learned over the decades that when we try to apply Eastern wisdom to Western societies, we first have to understand how Western culture and the Western mind is working. And when you have a look at whatever comes from Asia to Europe, you see it's compromised. It starts with monosuculi, which is called in Europe lean. Yeah, it's an in organizational design, and you see it's not the same anymore. It's something completely different, and often not for the better. And the same with Eastern wisdom. What I do in my workshops and seminar is I address I motivate the participants to engage into conflict. I work with paradoxical intervention. Yeah, if you want to get angry, do it. There's always chocolate. Yeah. So people can relax, yeah, and can say what's on their mind, and they can disrupt each other, and and it's a more relaxed way to losing the fear of conflict. What you are telling us is all about mindfulness. Yeah, and the little bit more Western pepper added to this might work a little bit better in Germany and England and the United States and so on, to say, to hell with conflict, it's an interesting thing. Yeah, conflict from a systems perspective leads to systems differentiation, to new ideas. Stuff like that. But when people are in fear of expressing their anger and their frustration and so on, and then they meditate in Germany, they often become even more angry, but they do not know this any longer. Yeah. So I think truthfulness and authenticity are important as well. Yeah, the livelihood of the vividness of the human mind and the human individuality is something really important. And I think it is a good idea to think of ambivalence and polyvalence and ambiguity and undeterminedness and conflict and so on as, on one side, of course, very frustrating things often, but on the other, yeah, they can lead to a higher level of interconnectedness, of creativity, and so on. Yeah, so I think we should work on this also. And one way is to add, and I always say this, to the psychological perspective, the perspective of sociology, with asking the question of which forms of systems are really functional in context of the overall system. Yeah, and then you often see that frustrated people may be even more efficient than when they are balanced. So what's to do there? Yeah, you have to become creative and help to stay frustrated, but in a more relaxed way. Yeah, that's something I would like to add here. And I think that this can work on a global scale when we look at Davos, yeah, and so on, where people are really motivated to do something, and then in the end we see, okay, there's not so much happening here, and that's frustrating on a global level. Yeah, but when we see we are just simple humans, and the universe is infinite, yeah, and we are so small, but we can do this small thing we can do with lots and lots of humor and vigor. Yeah, and openness to the perspective of others, even if they say something that's disturbing us. Because the one thing I have learned is the only way, Clara, I can distinguish you from myself is when you say something disturbing. That is when I learned you are not me. Yeah, you are another person, and you're delivering me something that is, what? What's she saying here? No, I do not agree. And then okay, that is something I would not have come up with.
So then again, it helps you to clarify your mind.
Yeah.
So to come back to that term, I really like that. Clarify your mind. That's the starting point. Thank you. I would take these as closing remarks. And I don't know, Hans, you were on the whiteboard. Do you want to say anything to what you did? Great work.
What I did, concentrating on the talks, on the impulses and so on. Yes, you may have a look on what I've done. It's more like a word cloud as well. So experiment state is experimental. And I think we got there are some focus points which I tried to arc in that, how do you say, orange, little dark orange, to connect, to dig in deeper, to go on further, to clear the question of humankind. Also, it will can be answered. Yeah, and so far, many drawings, many words, and perhaps if you look it up again after this session, you might remember something or could dig in deeper for yourself.
Maybe you put the link again into the chat so people can, just in case that they haven't done it at the beginning, that they can do it now to have a look at the...
Also, we have some new guests. They came after the chat later to the breakouts.
Right.
Did it.
Okay, thank you. So for the ones who came later, Hans was working on a whiteboard, trying to put the major ideas or some of the discussion points there, and so that we have it documented.
Okay. Old economy would call it protocol, but it's not steno.
Protocol is just like sharp. We have a protocol.
And if you have ideas on articles or articles already written, send them to us. We will publish them at Karl Lauer Magazine as an ongoing publishing book related to the conferences. And next year, we will all meet again in a little, and we will change again the concept of the conferences. We will work slowly from one step after the other, as you said, Mr. Moti, as the World Economic Forum did. This is something that will grow over the years, and then it becomes something substantial over the years. Yeah, so next year, we would love to ask you to invite 3 of your peers to bring with you, so we can grow from here a little bit more, and we will reduce the conferences to 4, from 8 to 4, to give it a little bit more quality. Yeah, under the topic Larnaca-Conferences, the future of mankind.
Thank you.
And thank you all for participating in this. This was quite the event, I think. Yeah. I loved it very much. Mr. Moti, would you like to say something as the one who had the keynote, to give us your last ideas?
Well, I don't want to take too much time. I know all of you are restless, and especially my friend from China must be past midnight now. So I'll just take a quick few minutes. One, there is, as Ms. Gitapian said, there is no one-size-fits-all solutions. What works for some may not work for others. So, and because of cultural, differences, etc., you have to be sensitive to all that, and we need to find a consensus on how we're going to deal with this. I fully agree on that. But at the same time, may I add that you don't necessarily have to reinvent the wheel when it's already there. So, because you have cultures, civilizations like China and India, which have seen all this, and we have gone through all this. So it is genetically embedded in our genes. We are dangerous people, China and India, and we are neighbors. and so we have it all in our genes, and all the answers are there with us. So you don't have to necessarily reinvent. You can learn from each other. We have to learn a lot from others, like others can also learn from us. And what is admirable is Germany, which has understood this. And if you look at, there are over 100 Indology departments spread across Germany, and almost all the universities have this now. And they are decoding what India has in its, has stashed away in its centuries old of thousands of years old of knowledge by learning Sanskrit, which is the oldest Indian language. The second is that I think humanity today is like if you have read Alice in Wonderland, some of you may have. Alice goes to the Wonderland, and the gardener there says, "Come, run with me. I will show you this Wonderland." And they're running, and she gets tired, and she says, "Why are we running so much?" He says, "Well, even to stay where you are, you should keep running." And this is what is happening to our humankind today. We are running so fast, aimlessly, and I add headless chicken, without any idea of what is happening. And we are going in a direction which is kind of being led by this materialistic world. Unless we change direction, there is no quick set answers. We have to change. That is evident. And that change, as we all agreed, has to come in steps, small doses. The last thing I want to say is about bliss, about happiness versus bliss. Human beings, and my colleague from China had mentioned this, have this nature of instant gratification. A glass of beer gives you a high, or a smoke, a cigarette, which gives you a high, but it's instant and it's short-lived. And this is what humanity is going through today. We are running after this instant gratification. The moment we stop this and realize that this is not going to give us that happiness, then you understand that there is something more than happiness in life. If you're being to Bombay, as you drive from the airport to the city of Bombay, which takes about, today because of the traffic, takes about 2 hours, you will see on either side of the road the slums of India. It used to be very bad. Now it is slightly better because India is also moving up. But you will see children, naked children, playing in the sidewalk. Mothers, half-clad, mostly exposed bodies because they have no money, cooking on the sidewalks. And they are happy. They have this kind of a bliss in their face. Okay, they have one meal a day. They eat one meal a day. And right now, as we speak, they have probably gone, some of them have gone home, gone to bed. Some children have gone to bed, in empty stomach. But they are yet happy and playing. They are in a state of bliss. That is bliss. And remember other thing, despite all this poverty that India still has, the crime rate is the lowest in the world in relation to our population. How does that come? How does it happen? It is because there is something within us which takes you to that state of bliss and says, I am born in this life for this, to suffer this, because of some past consequences, some past actions. And we have this famous karma theory. We believe in karma. What you reap, you will sow. If you sow the whirlwind, if you sow the wind, you will reap the whirlwind. So whatever action, every action has an equal and opposite reaction. This is what we believe in, the theory of karma. And you will see this bliss and happiness in the faces of hungry people in India. So that is the difference between happiness and bliss. And I want to end here. I don't want to say anything more because it will dilute what I have already said. But I just want to leave this thought with you, that this thing of chasing instant gratification should stop gradually. We should go to that deeper world, deep dive into ourselves. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much to our panelists from the East and sharing with us this Eastern view. to make it really sort of much more global. And I think it's so important that we learn from each other. Thank you very much to all of you. Have a nice night, nice evening, nice morning, whoever.
Good night, sleep.
Hope to see you again.
Stay connected.
Thank you.
Thank you, Clara. Thank you, Mr. Moti. Have a lovely evening and night.